Hey everybody, welcome back to another all-new X is for Show, your premier media response show. As always, you can check the show out on X is for Show on all your soch. As for me, I'm Nico, and you can check me out at Nico Action on all those very same soch. And that's NICOACTION, and what a fearless night we have ahead of us.
You're really committing to Soch, huh?
Oh,
This
soch
is
hard.
this is 2 shows in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm TK, and you can find me on social media at TK Elemental.
Yeah, and that makes me your producer, Kevo, and you can find me on the Socials, Soci, Sociarino at Kevo Really. That's KEVOREALLY. Oh, I think.
Yeah, we had a temporary, we fixed that. So, I am so excited to be here talking about Daredevil today. We are here to talk about two different Daredevil number ones. Now, what's interesting about these two different Daredevil number ones, Volume 2 and Volume 8, are that they are two volumes that both require a little bit of like revamp and reset to make it all work super well. Now, TK, I've read Volume 2 before, but I don't believe you have.
I had not, and now I've read it a few times through. And I'll be honest with you, I'm actually, so we had originally intended to do this episode last week, but some stuff came up and we decided to work on a different plan. And I'm absolutely actually super psyched about that because I had done 2 read-throughs, but I don't think there was a lot of stuff that I was like, well, I'm getting this wrong, because that would just be nonsense. And Nico will explain it to me at some point. And, you know, before we had time to talk about it, we started working on another subject, but we finally got to talking about it in the last week as we were preparing. And I feel like I did like a very cursory reread in the hours up to this episode. And I feel like I really understood this run a lot better in ways that made some of it a lot better and some of it a lot worse.
I know that feeling. You know, it's a really interesting thing to take a look back at the arc that really is the thing that put the world of Daredevil on the map. And when I say put the world of Daredevil on the map, I'm specifically referring to the fact that it was sort of a rough time for Daredevil. So let's start by getting up an image of what we're here to talk about today. Right. So we're going to be taking a look at a number of the Daredevil number ones that have been, I don't know, the hallmark of a series is its relaunch at a number one. That's like the whole point of, you know, oh, look, this is starting a new era. This is beginning something. But I feel like in the last couple of years, as we're going to see when we start getting into the specifics of Daredevil and these runs, that the number ones start coming a lot faster. We're taking a look at the second ever Daredevil number one, launched in 1998, as well as the most recent Daredevil number one, which came out a little bit earlier this year. Now, TK, you and I have talked a lot in the last couple of years about the frequency of number ones and the shortening of eras. Now, we just, you know, I brought you into Daredevil with the run by Chip Zdarsky. And the first volume he did was 36 issues. Then it was followed by a volume that was 14 issues. Now we're at this new number one. This is our third number one for Daredevil in 5 years. That's a very different Marvel Universe than when this run began.
Is this volume 8?
Yes.
This is volume 8, yeah. So we go from volume 2 in 1998, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, that's 15 years. Sorry, 25 years.
Yeah, so it's been 25 years since Guardian Devil. And in that time, we've had volume 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 launch.
So that's like every 3 or 4 years, there's a new volume of Daredevil.
Yep.
That's pretty weird.
And, you know, I think it really talks a little bit about the nature of the changing industry. So I want to take a moment to pull up a slideshow that I created for this episode and go a little bit over this material. Right? So, you know, when Daredevil first kicked off back in 1964. The main thing about it was clearly trying to conjure up images of other books. You've got a giant Spider-Man on it. You've got the full Fantastic Four on there. There really is a desire to sort of create a visual that reflects other things in the Marvel universe. And I feel like because of that, Daredevil started as a second tier character. He kind of started as like the alpha second tier character. And now he's sort of like the lowest down major character. And for that reason, I think, when you look back at 1964's Daredevil #1, he looks so silly. This really is a very different Marvel universe. And I think it took Daredevil kind of until the Guardian Devil run in 1998 to get that sort of respect.
But what was the vibe at the time from readers?
I mean, it was beloved. It was really, we'll get into it because I don't want to jump into 1998, but it was really well received because there had been nothing going on in Daredevil in the 90s.
What was the vibe for this #1?
I mean, I can't tell you. I'm not. There isn't really enough good data on it. All there really is nostalgia. There's people saying I loved it. There's people saying I remember getting it as a kid. There's the other problem is that there weren't people who were really reading and writing in letters. And when they did read and write in letters, they didn't read and write in letters that people really wanted to read. So the writers and editors would just have other people write letters for them. Yeah. And they would just put them in themselves. So there's really no way to gauge if this was really popular or not in 1964.
Because whenever I see imagery of Daredevil, it kind of takes a little bit for him to seem campy. Like this doesn't look campy to me at all. This actually looks very cool and very straightforward. But it's very obvious that there's a chunk of time pre-Miller where it is really just kind of silly.
I mean, I appreciate you saying it doesn't feel silly to you. I think the little pose in the corner with his arms behind his back like that, I just think he does come off kind of clownish early on. And I even really like these stories. But what's interesting a lot to say about this Daredevil era, specifically #1, is this is the only issue drawn by Bill Everett. Bill Everett was known for co-creating a lot of the earliest Marvel heroes. And this is the only issue of Daredevil he would go on to draw. Subsequent issues would feature Wally Wood as well as John Romita Sr. So it's really fascinating that this is a #1 that wasn't done by Jack King Kirby. It wasn't done by any of the other stable of the bullpen, and yet it would go on to be such a definitive, look for the character. Though it is definitely the yellow suit does not last for a good reason. So to take a look at a few more early major issues of Daredevil. Daredevil runs actually, they kind of don't last very long as a rule. While Stan Lee wrote 1 to 50, with the exception of issue 10, which was a fill-in by then penciler Wally Wood, Roy Thomas kicked on in 1969's Daredevil 51. Jerry Thomas would take over in January of 71, so not even 2 full years later with Daredevil 72. The title changes to being Daredevil and the Black Widow, and then it goes back to the Man Without Fear from issue 92 to 108. So Black Widow was the co-star by name for a year and a half before in 1974, Tony Isabella comes on for, as you can see, 6 issues. It's not a great run, and that's December 1974, which brings us to Marv Wolfman in May of 1975, and in Daredevil 124 he comes on, and that's not really the big thing. The big thing is that he co-creates Bullseye, who first appears in Daredevil 131 later that year. Editor-in-chief Jim Shooter had to get his paws on Daredevil, and he co-wrote 141 and did a short run, which brings us to Roger McKenzie in December of 1977, who would go on to be Frank Miller's co-creative partner for the early part of his run. So, all I can think to myself here is it takes so long for Daredevil as a title to get to the sort of stuff that we recognize to be Daredevil.
Right.
Which is funny because I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that nobody has been super interested in mining the old stuff the way they have been with, for instance, the X-Men. Nobody wants to take Telford Porter, Daredevil's equivalent of the Vanisher, and put him on X-Force and give him cancer that they will only cure if he teleports them. But the Vanisher sucks. And like the original Vanisher is lame and stupid. And, there's just always some group of people that read early X-Men, even if they're like our age or younger, that got their hands on early X-Men and were like, that was cool, I'm going to remix it. It doesn't seem like that is so much the case with Daredevil, where people were like, I was so taken aback by those early defining stories where, Stan Lee was really telling this great metaphor about disability, living with disability in the modern age, that I've got to bring back.
Well, I mean, and just to jump in on that, the people who do, it's such a difficult, embarrassing situation to deal with, because it's like Stiltman. And yes, we have recaptured Stiltman, and the magic is there. We are very protective of Stiltman.
That is a weird one-off. That's the exception that proves the rule.
Exactly. That's really what it is. And it's
I guess you could say... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's in part because these stories aren't great, and I really appreciate your outside perspective being really positive on them, but they're silly.
Well, no, I'm saying they look cool. I'm not. I don't. A lot of these I did not read, and I have. I've attempted, I barely can read old X-Men, and I don't even. Guys, I'll be the one to say it. The Dark Phoenix saga is not an easy read. It's not a fun read. It's iconic, of course. Couldn't have anything without it. But is it my first choice? No. I'm just glad I read it when I was a kid and I didn't know that there was a lot else to look for. But now it's very, it's lots of words to say a very quick thought. So there's a lot of the old books that I find a little bit insufferable, and they really have to kind of inform the later stuff. So my biggest takeaway from starting volume 2 is I kind of now want to read a little bit more about Matt's relationship with Natasha. So, I'm looking at that Daredevil and the Black Widow and I'm thinking, I'd be curious.
It's a great era. Tori and I really love it. And it's a thing that, if you're a big Daredevil fan, you really get a sense of it. I don't know. I really recommend that era pretty greatly. But it really does take until 1980, April, with Daredevil 165 for Frank Miller to really start to direct the series into a positive angle. Elektra doesn't show up in the title until 168. From there, we see Kingpin show up in 170. And then Frank Miller actually ends his run in 191 back in October of 1982. So it's really interesting that landmark era for X-Men ran 15 years, but for Daredevil is just, 4. So from here, I want to say that we go into a short run by Denny O'Neil. It's not really well regarded. It's really just a run that exists to fill the gap. Frank Miller left. Nobody wanted to follow Frank Miller. And in that time, Miller didn't have the most work going on at Marvel. He did little things here and there, like he did the Elektra saga. Now, the Elektra saga is mostly just a reprint collection of the original issues of Daredevil that feature Elektra, but it actually does feature a short sequence that is unique to this Elektra saga that would go on to be reprinted in the Elektra Omnibus. And after that, Frank Miller had already reestablished a really positive relationship at Marvel, and he comes back and he does Badlands, which is Daredevil 219. It's pretty famous for never once having Matt be Daredevil, and Daredevil is not mentioned by name. It's a really interesting issue. But that leads into Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's landmark legendary Born Again, which is Daredevil 225 to 233 from December 85 to August 86. And this is in many ways considered the best Daredevil run of all time. It certainly hasn't aged particularly well in some regards, but I think if you read it, it's impossible not to see that is specifically what I think Kevin Smith was hoping to recapture with his Guardian Devil. He was thinking, oh, you guys think you know what Born Again should be like? Well, this is 90s Born Again, guys. This is crazy. This is Mallrats Born Again. And so, like, I think that really is what we sort of saw happen, but it took so long. And whereas Chris Claremont never left the X-Men, or, Wolfman and Perez stayed pretty tightly on Teen Titans, Miller left. And the stuff in between, man, the Denny O'Neil run is, trash. And, like, I'm not coming for Denny O'Neil, but it's about Micah Sin, a man who is vaguely a white South African who is so big and muscular and sexy and hairy and white. I just need to be clear, he is white, that all the women in New York can't resist him. And it's not that he has powers of pheromones, it's just his pheromones are so sexually delicious. No woman can turn him down. Like, Foggy's wife leaves him for this guy.
Yikes.
It's a tough run. So,
No, I mean, I just, it's fascinating thinking about the fact that we're about to pick up on Born Again for the MCU. And we've just kind of really shuffled with Daredevil in a way, like, kind of not dissimilar to how the X-Men stories really just kind of shuffled all over the place. Like, we never really went to a specific origin place that sort of matched with comic book origins. And after, the Netflix show, the amazing Ben Affleck film, to be going all the way back to this particular story as, like, and this was my first, like, when you and I started talking about reading Daredevil, this was the first thing that you had me read. And so for this to kind of kick off the MCU, I think is very interesting. Although how much it really hews to this or is just kind of a reference to the name will be interesting to see.
Could you go back one slide just very quickly? I'm just really most blown away seeing this timeline out in front of me by how far from the origin point of Daredevil so many things that Daredevil is known for are, and how far apart so many of them are from each other. Like Bullseye's first issue being 75 is wild, Elektra being 81 is wild, and then the next slide seeing where Born Again lands, where Kingpin's first issue lands, and all these things that are sort of iconic things for Daredevil, like 20 years almost after the character's inception.
And that's why I liken it to the fact that for X-Men, the X-Men were first created in 1963. They were giant-sized in 75, which is sort of like the effect of Miller coming in and revitalizing Daredevil. But then in 1991, Jim Lee, along with Chris Claremont, together they reimagined what the X-Men could be in a big 90s way. Daredevil ultimately did get that with Guardian Devil, for better or for worse. But the thing that really is hard to miss is that's, I think, why, TK, with you being like, I don't think these covers look that silly. I'm like, okay, but I know what's inside. And it's fighting a guy who looks like an owl, whose power is the power of owl feathers. Because he's not really, menacing for a while. It's just like, literally, one of his powers is basically being kind of obese and landing on you. It is not great.
It's wild that the owl was supposed to have Apocalypse's place in X Factor.
Oh, man, because Bob Layton's just a cool old guy. He was just like an old school guy who wanted to write old school stories. And then, Louise Simonson comes in and goes,
it needs to be a horrifying blue cyborg. It cannot be an old fat man in an owl suit.
That's correct.
That is 100% correct.
So then by the way, Born Again is my favorite Marvel comic of all time.
Yes.
Not just because it came out when I was born, but a million reasons. So, Born Again actually starts what's considered the return of Miller, and it's the Miller Return trilogy. It's Born Again, Elektra, Assassin 1 through 8, and Daredevil Love and War, which is a one-shot graphic novel. Ann Nocenti takes the reins on Daredevil in Daredevil 236, which came out November of 86. Again, still that same magic year of Born Again. 86 is actually the year the comics were kind of reborn, of course, with things like Watchmen and The Dark Knight. So then we get to, the love of TK's life, Typhoid Mary's first issue. Typhoid Mary, I remember, guy who was best man at my wedding, good friend of mine, Chris Podcasts, who co-created my first podcast with me. He was, so he and I were like, we were drunk or smoking something, I could not tell you, but we were like, 20. And being like, oh, we're home from school, from college, and like we have all this worldly experience, and now we understand everything because we're home from midterms, and let's talk about it. And he's like, did you see that Elektra movie? That movie, Typhoid? That's not my Typhoid. That's not Typhoid from my childhood. That's not her. And I remember looking over at him, and I was like, okay, which one of us has read Daredevil? You're telling me you're obsessed with a crazy, by the era standards, crazy soap opera actress, supervillain, assassin, pyrokinetic. Like, do you know who she is? And he was like, well, no, she's cool. She's Typhoid Mary. I had trading cards of her. And I'm like, ah. So I think what I'm even trying to say is, despite the fact that Typhoid Mary came out 2 years after I was born, her impact was so significant that by the time Elektra came out and featured a pretty rough Typhoid Mary imitation, it was enough to like deeply upset fans who had no idea she was only 25 years old at that point. She was only, at the point at which the Daredevil and Elektra films came out, she was only as old as Guardian Devil is now.
I have more thoughts on that later.
Okay, I love it. We love Elektra Lives Again in this house. This is an Elektra Lives Again house.
We love it, but we fully understand if it is not for you. It is a bit inscrutable.
You get to see Matt's penis while all of New York burns to the ground.
I mean, for some, the dream. For some, a bit confusing.
I do love that, though.
Who doesn't love a penis during a city on fire?
And of note is the fact that this is an Epic Comics release.
Oh, that is correct. It is not a Marvel Comics release proper, and it's right there. It just says Epic Comics on it in that block letters, like it means something. It just means it wasn't approved by the comic code. Okay. I have a lot of feelings. D.G. Chichester, I would love to like sit down and talk to you about how your run was meant to be something so much better. But D.G. Chichester was the unfortunate guy who followed Ann Nocenti the way, we said just a few slides ago that I just want to get the name right. Denny O'Neil followed. I was like, is it Roger McKenzie or Denny O'Neil? Think. The way Denny O'Neil followed Frank Miller. I would not want to be D.G. Chichester and follow Ann Nocenti. That is, part of what we have Daredevil genius Tori Sheehan coming on in a little bit, and she can speak a whole lot more about what it means to be disregarded and disrespected as a woman in comics. But like, Ann Nocenti was always just not Frank Miller for coming second and being a woman. They did very different things. They are not even comparable runs. Ann Nocenti's run is much more concerned with social issues and the realities of children, whereas Frank Miller's is much more concerned with top stories, rip right from the headlines kind of action. And there's a lot more ninja stuff to the Miller era, but there's a lot more Christian stuff to the Nocenti era. And so that duality gives you a lot of room. But so, because they're the two big runs on it, the two big modern runs at that time, of course, they're always going to be compared. And Nocenti was never going to be Miller in the cultural respect. So I guess D.G. Chichester is the guy who follows up the woman who's not the big guy. That is the most also ran description I can think of. And he had been the editor toward the end of the Nocenti run. This guy just never had a chance. And then he goes ahead and he has to do a crossover with Punisher and Nomad. He has to make a big deal out of 300. He's got to make a meal out of it. And I don't think it works the way he means it to. He has to do returning Elektra to Daredevil. He has to do Fall from Grace. This guy has some of the heaviest lifting to do in the Daredevil, oeuvre. And it just does not go off without a hitch. It just does not. So it's a tough time to look back on. But I will note that all of my first comics ever are on this page. My first comics were Fall from Grace and The Man Without Fear. So all my first comics ever right here on this page. That Daredevil versus Vapora one shot, that thing is so fucking famous. It's kids don't drink gasoline because gasoline is an evil mistress. So don't do it.
That old classic tale.
And if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about Daredevil and Black Widow, you can check them out in Black Widow Daredevil Abattoir, which was the final Marvel graphic novel, which was in the line, published in July 1993. It's by Jim Starlin and Joe Chiodo. It's a kind of standard classic for both characters, even though I don't think it really goes then. We have talked at length about The Man Without Fear 1 through 5, and of course I could talk about it a whole lot more. But this page really represents kind of like 90s excess. You can see how much stuff came out in such a short period of time.
You know, but I get it, because I do remember Man Without Fear. I don't think it had the same effect on me that it had on you, but I think it was really designed to get kids of our generation hooked on. It was actually a very smart starting point. And it remains one of a bunch of initiatives at Marvel where, is it a reshuffling of continuity because it's not quite what had originally happened? Is it just, you know, this is what you need to know, and if it doesn't match, that's not really something worth being concerned about or something that we will resolve. You can just kind of take this and go forward. And in this world where now we're like, if you start telling the X-Men's origin story again, that's a reboot. And then we got to talk about reboot rules, and then everything that came before doesn't count. It's very interesting that they were just like, yeah, here is a new retelling of what happened to Matt in his early years.
Well, and you know, I want to mention that speaking of this era in particular, the thing that's so interesting about that Psy being on the cover of Daredevil number 325 is Ralph Macchio and Frank Miller had a gentleman's agreement that Elektra was not to be used without Miller's permission. And at this point, Ralph Macchio was kind of like, look, Frank Miller, I am scared of you, but I work for a company. Elektra can be used. I'm sorry. And it was a big deal. They made this big arc. It introduced the black costume. It's just not a well-loved or remembered time. And all the proof you need, the guy who introduces the black costume, he's off the book within 8 issues. Now, Gregory Wright, who took over the book for a short period, starting with Daredevil 333 in August of 94, it's actually not his first issue of Daredevil. This is so fascinating. He had written like 4 annuals in a row. He had done annuals during the Ann Nocenti run in the late 80s and only got the title in August of 94. Now, his run would only last a short time, with industry legend J.M. DeMatteis taking over at 344. Elektra, Root of Evil, Elektra's first solo outing as a mini, came out in January of 95. Carl Kiesel, who would return a couple of times to the title, takes over in September of 96. Elektra gets an ongoing and a magazine, sure, in September of 96. And then we get into the garbage crossover period, but I can see Kevin was so excited about Elektra magazine.
I was going to do the Donna from the West Wing thing. And a boyfriend. Does she get a boyfriend? Because that would just really complete the title.
She starts dating Wolverine for a little bit.
I'll take it. That really counts.
TK, do you remember the hyper infusion of Daredevil and Elektra into the market? Elektra's even in Marvel vs. DC. She's the fight against Catwoman, which is so unfair.
This is about where I step off, actually. This is a little bit before Operation Zero Tolerance, but even then I'm not super, I'm familiar with Daredevil from the earlier part of the 90s because at that point I was just like, I already love the X-Men comics. What else is there out there? And I did not enjoy Avengers. I weirdly really enjoyed West Coast Avengers, but then it immediately ended. I was like, this is very novel that they are in California. And then I kind of Force Works, I couldn't keep me going long enough. But yeah, no, my familiarity with Daredevil prior to this period was because I was kind of soaking up everything comics that I could. And then I was like, no, I think mostly what works is the X-Men. And then I was like, the X-Men do not work anymore. I got to take a break. So I'm not, this era is not something I'm really familiar with. But I mean, I get it. Like this is peak, like, gimme hot babes for the millennial nerd teens.
Well, and it's gimme hot babes by specific artists, which is why we get the She crossover, the Witchblade and Psyblade crossover, the other She crossover, and then we even get like Daredevil, Deadpool, which, by the way, if you're going to make a Typhoid Mary omnibus, that Daredevil, Deadpool annual is like quite literally like the turning point for her canon. We do get a new run from industry legend Joe Kelly, who is one of the creators of Ben 10. Real cool dude. But then there's the first of the two Daredevil Batman crossovers, which is just sort of like brooding in red and blue. A lot of fun there. That one's Daredevil Batman. And then, of course, a few years later, we get Batman Daredevil. But this is where the 90s go off the frigging rails. Elektra -1, Daredevil -1. There was a whole -1 month. It was, and these -1s give birth to the 0 and the half we have to talk about, and then the .1s. I can't even. Uncanny Origins, I have accidentally continued to label Witchblade and Elektra, but it actually should say is the origin of Daredevil. Scott Lobdell does 4 really weird issues in which Daredevil is an amnesiac who thinks he's a French SHIELD agent. So he did 4 issues of Daredevil that have nothing to do with Daredevil, but the only thing that happens is Foggy Nelson is like, wait, you're really Daredevil and I'm not going to unlearn it this time? And then the next month they end the title and Kevin Smith gets the book. Wild.
But you're missing 2 things in that list. Talk to me about Protection Racket.
All right, so Protection Racket is a... so Marvel was really excited to experiment with digital comics, right? And so they're looking at how to work with digital comics. And the first thing they realize is they need to learn how to do this in the first place. And early Marvel digital comics are these panel by panel, like solid frames. They've got these little numbers running across the bottom. It's a sort of painful process to try and read them. D.G. Chichester wrote a few of these early Marvel web comics, and the craziest thing is Marvel kind of has disavowed them. Marvel makes no reference to these. They don't put them online. They don't keep them in any way that's significant. So D.G. Chichester just put up his literal like page copies of the panels and put them online.
And we can all kind of understand why they were disavowed.
It is a really tough thing to read. It looks kind of janky when you put it all together. I did manage to get my hands on all of the panels and arrange them together in a page, and it looks a little rough. It's a little hard to read.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they were, as you mentioned, there was no conception of higher resolutions in the future, and there was really no technology to there was no affordable technology to create in higher resolutions with the hope that, we would have the densely packed pixels per inch that we have on an iPad or something today. So, if it was 376 by 500, that's just what you did.
And the problem with the image degradation is the fact of the matter is that we're used to the art looking a little bit better. We need to be able to zoom in a little bit more. We look to be able to interact with it pretty clearly, and it's just very hard to do this way.
Yeah, but it's a fun historical document. I wish they would play around with it a little bit.
And I think one of the things that we really need to think about is how much of this art was not meant to survive. Early digital art, they had no idea what they were doing. I'm pretty sure the only way to read Protection Racket was at AOL keyword Marvel. So and then shortly thereafter, Daredevil Volume 1 ends. So things like D.G. Chichester, several writers ago's digital work was nothing Marvel was looking to ensure the long-term success of. Now, at this point, I am going to cut our trip through the endless number ones of Daredevil a little short. We're going to take a look at this much longer project in sum total a bit later on another day. And instead today, we're going to focus on Daredevil Volume 2, Number 1 from August 1998 by Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada, as well as Daredevil Volume 8, Number 1 from September 2023 by Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Cooter. Now, these two number ones are 25 years apart, and it's so interesting because the first Daredevil relaunch, which came in 1998, was just about 25 years after Daredevil number 1. So this does reflect multiple iterations of this singular character identity across a spectrum of time. There's things that have to have changed: the way we see blind culture, the way we treat superheroes, the idea of what a lawman is, the identity of the police, and the identity of the police and superheroes working together in tandem. A lot has changed since not just 1964, but 1998. And I'm really looking forward to exploring these changes. But before we can even get into that, I want to ask you guys, when you think Daredevil, what's your Daredevil? Is he the laughing swashbuckler? Is he a magic guy? Is he like a lawman? I think it's so interesting that the cover of Daredevil 8, Volume 8, Number 1, the Billy Club hook maybe looks perhaps a little, I don't want to say silly. That's not very fair to say because it's a really great cover. But, it's JRJR. There's no coming for it in my book. But the hook almost looks like a candy cane topper. Like you would get like them a little candy cane toy filled with like Hershey Kisses. There's something kind of cartoony about it, and I think that's great because when Daredevil gets too serious artistically, it doesn't work for me as much. My Daredevil kind of does need to live in multiple worlds. He lives in a world of magic and ninjas and resurrections, but he also lives in a world of Bibles and priests. He lives in a world of superheroes, but he also lives in a world of lawmen where he's actually frequently going up against the establishment. I think for me, Daredevil, if anything, is a study of the saint and sinner, of the devil and the Christian at all times. How about you guys?
This is one of the things I'm still trying to figure out because I really do not resonate with the very religious and religiously guilty Matt. And it's interesting because the Smith run kind of posits that Matt is a pretty lapsed Catholic, raised in the faith, but doesn't remember CCD anymore, like doesn't remember the details of CCD and doesn't follow and is not practicing so much now that he has kind of reabsorbed that knowledge in new ways from being active in the community. It's like one of the first lines somebody asks him about, like, does he know about this thing? And he's like, I probably learned about it in CCD, but I don't remember now. And he is kind of not at home in the church space physically. So his experience is very much kind of, similar to how I am not religiously Jewish. I'm not really at this point even culturally Jewish because I don't exist with a lot of Jews, but the Jewishness that I experience is mostly cultural and mostly has to do with institutions founded and maintained primarily by Jewish people that, often might have ties to the religion, but are not themselves wildly, like, the mission day to day is not religious. In the same way that, like, Karen knows where to find Matt because he donates to a shelter that is run by the Catholics, but Matt doesn't donate to the shelter because it is a Catholic shelter. He knows about the Catholic shelter because he is a Catholic. He grew up in the Catholic faith, and
Right.
he sees that money being supported. So the point of that being, like, I was surprised thinking about this, that like Zdarsky makes him much more like, I am a very Catholic man, sir, and that is killing me inside because I would like to do murder. But Smith's is like, I could do a murder or two because I've forgotten what Catholicism is about, which only becomes problematic because Kevin Smith has not forgotten what Catholicism is about and cannot let it go. See Dogma, which came out not far away from this Daredevil run. So, you know, thinking about it, I really resonated with the Zdarsky run, and that is the first time that I have seen the depiction of Matt as the guardian of Hell's Kitchen in a way that started to vibe with me. But it only kind of starts after he gets out of jail, Mary goes back to being Mary, and then Devil's Reign starts. It only really starts when the whole city, and then in particular Hell's Kitchen, is in dire peril. And he and Wilson kind of don't agree, but like both sort of agree that like there's a higher mission here. They don't agree on what to do, but anyway, the long and short of that being, my Matt, I think, is the guy with the mission. I think that's, and you know, what worked about the Red Fist saga as an idea was the mission goes on to be a prophetic one, and one that might be able to jive with his very strong personal beliefs, that he might be able to reconcile the kind of mystic world of Marvel and the complex pantheon of Marvel gods and demons with his own faith. And yeah, I mean, I think that really is, to me, that he is the guy with the mission. I think that's my Daredevil. I think final answer.
Go. Do you want to frame it for me?
You know, that was going to be my whole thing. You know, Kevo, you've been a sideline person for Daredevil for so long. What's your Daredevil?
I mean, you know, I don't have as much comic experience. You gave me some to read at the beginning of our relationship, but I mostly hear about everything that's going on through you. So my experience is mostly, what's Hottie's name? Charlie Cox. And so I guess that's mostly who the Matt that I mostly know and mostly vibe with. And I really liked him on She-Hulk. And I know that's such a controversial answer, but I love seeing light, fun, still kick-ass Matt. You know, because it's about the peaks and valleys, and we haven't really gotten a lot of fun peaks from Netflix Matt yet. So that was really nice to see, especially if we are going to see him be torn down in Born Again. I'm really intrigued to see how that version of the character is going to shape up after so much time away from Netflix, after this brief appearance on She-Hulk. What is this version of the character going to be like after all this, after how much more history there has been added to the character with Elektra and everything that's happened in the past few years? I really wonder how that's going to influence the live action adaptation of the character, because it should.
Well, and I love that you brought up She-Hulk, because Matt does kind of fuck around a lot. And so, you know, like even in the Zdarsky run, he has like just a random like hookup friend. Elektra comes back. There's always a vibe with Mary when she's in the mix. And so like the idea that he would meet another lawyer and another superhero and, you know, have a little fling in California, I think is totally true to the character. And I hope will work for the future of the live action character, but also just really kind of makes me wish that we were seeing some reverberations of that in this new run, which it starts very grave. It starts very serious. This is very serious business happening in volume 8. And that's great. You know, I love serious business, but Matt and Jen Walters having some silly fun trying to do superhero hijinks and then, you know, going home and making sweet love is also very fun.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we can't just talk about who our Daredevil is. You know, that would be too easy. We need to bring in somebody who came in with a pair of eyes so unique for me. You know, when I talk about Daredevil, my Daredevil starts with comics. And so many of my friends that discuss comics started with the comic universe. But our very own Tori Sheehan, one half the Billy Club, she started with the TV show. And so that doesn't make her opinion any less terrific. In fact, it really spins what the comics are into a new light. So I would like to do nothing more than invite the one and only Tori up to the plate so that she can pitch us who her Daredevil is.
Hello, hello. So how are you? I'm straight off of the work commute. Who is my Daredevil, you ask? I am a... I like my Matt when he's happy and a little slutty and joking around and things like that. So it really kind of enjoyed him on She-Hulk. I think as we covered a lot on our Billy Club episode, I thought he was just absolutely fantastic. And I just want happy Matt. And I feel like it's going to be a while to see him with this new number one, but maybe fingers crossed.
I gave the same answer, Tori. We love happy, slutty Matt because you can't tear him down if you don't build him up.
Exactly. And I feel like he's got quite a road ahead of him because I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of literary thoughts on what on what our new writer is doing with what Zdarsky set up. So I'm sure we'll get into it.
So I'm going to use that as an opportunity to I'm not trying to put my slides back up. Kevy, can you make the slides go back? So I'm so excited. He's the producer. He's got the brains. So I'm really excited to talk about Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Kuder's Daredevil #1. This is the third Daredevil #1 in 5 years, like I said. Now, I really want to like this issue. Aaron Kuder is responsible for my favorite Avengers book of the last 20 years, Avengers Forever. The guy draws the sexiest Tony Stark in history, who's actually also the sexiest Ant-Man in history. Real interesting little character bit that we really, really love this character on this show. But this was not my #1. I really liked this issue. I really like what they're doing. And Aaron Kuder can make anything really terrifying. But, okay. Daredevil 14 ends with Daredevil waking up as a priest and Elektra continuing on in the role of Daredevil. The world of Daredevil actually just kind of continues without him. Mary and Wilson are two of the most important members of the X-Men right now. I don't understand how TK got everything he wanted in the world.
But you know I didn't, because immediately what happened is Emma and Tony are now allied against Wilson.
Which is not what I wanted either. But
no, I wanted him to be a bro. But anyway.
Did you see it going differently though? Tony doesn't like other rich, smart people around him.
Okay.
Sorry. Well,
I just want to say Tony doesn't like other guys with muscles.
Yeah.
But he would, and I'm telling you this, I mean this right now. I'm saying this to you very seriously. A conversation between Tony and Wilson would have them sitting across the table from one another, and Wilson would say, "You know, I'm not threatened by elitist educations and fathers with money." And Tony would say back, yeah, well, I'm not threatened by fat thugs who don't know how to build themselves anything, so I'm not worried about this. Are you? And like it would be that level of they just don't even register each other. So like it doesn't matter. They shouldn't be allied against. No one should be against each other in that situation. They're just not on the same.
I
That's
feel like
just-
they're the dude version of Deanne Carroll and Joan Collins having the champagne is burned
Well,
conversation
and
from
they're
Dynasty.
And they're also like the spouses of the people who are supposed to be there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This
For
is the
the
thing.
actual cool people we asked for.
Yeah.
That's 100% the case.
Yeah. Anybody else talk about this? I'm going to give it. Right now, I'm giving it a B.
Yeah.
I'm giving.
Well,
this
I'm going back.
time-
I'm going back for a second because I just want to say my initial prediction after before Devil's Reign started and the last Zdarsky run ended, because that ends with Wilson and Mary literally getting in a boat and sailing out of Manhattan because Wilson has lost, or sorry, Devil's Reign ends with that, because Wilson has lost control of New York. Luke Cage is going to be mayor and they've got to go. So they get in a boat and they sail away. Where the hell else would they possibly go but the island where Mary has citizenship? And as a result of that, they're probably not going to deny her husband when they have allowed Selene, the ancient vampire who has slaughtered millions of people, to just hang out. Like, by comparison,
But
Wilson
hold
is
on. But Wilson has so much blood on his hands. He really does match up to the mythic folk. Really, the amount of blood on Wilson's hands, he is Selene levels of a murderer.
I buy it, but I'm saying, like, if the rule is that Kyle Jinadu can be there and Selene can be there, then Wilson Fisk is fine. If Mary's allowed and husbands are, like, human husbands are allowed, then Mary's okay. So I thought they would
Rights
go.
are not just for the gays on Krakoa. I understand.
Exactly. So I thought they would go, and I sort of think no matter how you slice it, Wilson is a better person than Sebastian Shaw, who is the other rich white dude who's always trying to do seats of power stuff with the X-Men. So my thinking was this would happen. Mary would, of course, immediately become an X-Man and be the best X-Man. And Wilson would become, like, the better person to have doing your financial stuff and, like, being a marauder with the X-Men, like helping them, because like back when I'm making this prediction, the Marauders are like they're doing like property crimes. They're doing like property theft crimes and trying to like ship stuff across borders they're not supposed to go to, which is like, who better than Wilson Fisk? And then Emma is just like, don't step out of line because I'll kill you. And then that's the end of it. I really thought that's where it would go. So that we had Fall of X, that Mary is kind of an X-Man by default because of the group that she's with in, is it Valheim? Vanheim?
Vanheim, yeah.
Vanheim, thank you. Which just sounds like a place in Los Angeles, so I don't know. So she's doing that, but then so Wilson escapes immediately with Emma, and then they sign over control of the Hellfire Club to him, and they're like, Emma's like, and we will be partners. Like, I got you from afar. And then weirdly, just immediately in Iron Man, it's like, no, Wilson sucks. We're going to have to fight him. And that's where we are as of today. I haven't read Iron Man 10, which came out yesterday yet, but we're literally in the middle of this story right now. And I'm hoping that it'll all just be like smoke and mirrors to make something work. But I really don't want to do all the fun rich people versus Wilson Fisk thing. I want him to be a fun rich people.
Wilson Fisk is, I feel really bad because like you're not supposed to find some villains attractive, right?
Well, we know
Like,
about your thing with Wilson.
I don't
It's
think
fine.
anyone has ever said that.
But it's his conviction. Like, if you're asking me what I think is so sexy about Wilson, it's that Wilson will die to protect Manhattan. And like, I think that's even sometimes why he thinks that Matt is such a funny little man, because Matt is so fucking concerned with 3 square blocks. What is wrong with him? Wilson has concerns about a city. And I just, I want to say real quick, Kevo has an image I asked him to bring up for me. This is really, honest to God, this is the result of TK's love. Look at Mary in an X book
Yep.
being an X person. And
Yep.
it's not any X book, it's the magical X book that ties into the Thor mythos. That's the only Thor mythos that TK really loves. This
Yep.
is TK, this is a Venn diagram of you saying the universe and make it by Torrin Grunbuck.
I did sort of manifest this. It really is it's tough living with the fact that it's coming out of an era I distinctly did not ask for. In fact, I maybe asked for the exact opposite of this era. But, we take our small wins where we can get them. To the original question, anytime I'm critical of a book, I want to be so clear that I couldn't write this book. I could not write this. I certainly could not draw this book. So my critiques are more just what I wanted, what I was expecting, what I think works for a story.
Done for love.
What have I done for love? What has the love done for me lately? What has Daredevil done for me lately?
Where is the love?
It's not enough, said Hansen. The Zdarsky run ends, and we see that Matt is a priest again, and it just kind of over very few pages and panels sets up exactly where the world is. And then this number 1 does the exact same thing over again, which I understand that the idea is some people might not have read the Zdarsky run, and they're picking up here. I feel like that's a very thin slice of people, but let's assume it's not. Let's assume it's a larger slice that I'm thinking. So we've got to rehash it. I feel like there are still more enticing ways to have rehashed what happened. Or, given the fact that we saw the Zdarsky book do it in so few pages, I think it could have happened faster, and this book could have kind of been on to other stuff a little more quickly. I also, I went on a really long tangent when Nico and I were talking about it, just talking about what are the time scales here? Because is it has it been months that he's been a priest? Or who else in the world is wondering about what happened to Matt Murdock? Is that guy on the street vaguely looking like Matt Murdock? Are the other priests who is this guy? Nobody has ever heard of him. Or did God...
Did Mike Murdock get another chance too?
There's that. Did God, who apparently did all this, to thank Matt, rewrite reality in a similar way to how Mike kind of exists because of the Nornstones rewriting reality? Is there more going on to who he is? And the problem is, I like the idea that there is more going on, but I think very clearly there will not be. And it will just be Marvel is never willing to confront the wretched order they have made of their timescales and how none of this can possibly work. So, these were the things I really found myself thinking about and concerned about. And that's not really where I wanted my head to be at. So it was a little bit all over the place.
I am so excited to get your thoughts on this title. The only thing I want to do is I want to bring our final player to the stage.
Yeah.
Our very own blind spot, if you will. It's a Daredevil Volume 5 reference. So if our very own Echo, we're going to elevate him to Echo. We're promoting this guy through the ranks. Next thing you know, he's going to be Gladiator. Oh, man, nobody can make me cry like Mr. Potter can. Let's bring Jonah to the stage. And Jonah, I am so excited to have you on with us because Daredevil means the world to me. You mean the world to me. And it's going to be a really fun time bringing those things together. So, what's your name? Where can everybody find you?
Well, by the association property, that must make me Daredevil. Hi, I'm Jonah, Daredevil. You can find me over not in Hell's Kitchen, but over in a different city at and any social online at Peak Jonah. That's Peak.
All right. Now, Jonah, you get to listen to us talk about the scary, scary monster head that attached itself to Elektra's body in what can only be described as the most Cronenbergian, grotesque thing I've ever seen.
You mean Princess Poppy's talent show number?
It's up there. So Tori, talk to us. What was your relationship with Daredevil Volume 8, Number 1? And you have a sevenfold theory that I think is only going to become more evident as we approach a specific legacy number.
So, I actually kind of like this one. I think I was really swayed by page 3 and Matt looking so good in a cassock. I have a lot of hot priest ex-Catholic feels, much like Matt. And so I liked it a lot. I actually would have wanted more time of Matt having no idea of who he is as Daredevil, having, or like, I would have liked more time with Matt not knowing that Elektra's around, Matt not knowing what he's done. I would have maybe liked a little bit of maybe sleepwalking Daredevil work, but you know, that might be a step too far. So I actually would have loved to have seen this as like a two-parter, actually, so that we could stretch that out a little more. But I understand that we want to get back to the Hornhead swinging through. I loved this creepy old god like taking over Elektra, the way it draped itself behind her and took over her face. I loved
The Depeche Mode video.
Oh my god, it was so good. And I loved also in particular the weird little Catholic in me actually like zoomed in really close when he's walking into his little church for wayward youths that they're somehow still handing to Catholic priests in 2023. There's a sign that has a quote from the Bible in it, and it's from 1 John 4:18. There's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. Now, it could go one of two ways. Either one, someone figured out where the word fear was in the Bible and pulled the hottest quote they could from it, or two, this has, you know, echoes and things that are going to be seen throughout a lot of this, because I personally think that having gone through that Zdarsky set Daredevil up to go through the Inferno side of the Divine Comedy, and Saladin Ahmed is actually setting us up for the Purgatorio part of it, which is the earthly side, which is another look at the 7 deadly sins as we go through. Starting with sloth is a little weird, but we'll get them all as we go. And then I think we're going to hit up to Paradiso. But as Nico sent me today, we're heading up to the 666 number in just a couple of issues, which I'm very excited for. So hopefully we'll see something really cool. But I like this. I have high hopes. If they don't come to fruition, I will probably be less excited about this number 1. But I thought the visuals were gorgeous. I thought it was an interesting take. I love the idea of Elektra continuing to do Daredevil work, even though Matt can't see her doing the work. So like she's actually like praying to an unseeing, unknowing God. And so that was interesting to like think about the idea of Elektra and faith when it comes to these characters. But yeah, like I had a good time with this, you know? I really enjoyed it.
I also just want to point out that we are living in the grand age of Elektra. This is the day and age of the electric nacho. We have Elektra had Woman Without Fear. We had Elektra 100. We all have the upcoming Daredevil Gang War, which is, okay, that's the only thing that I just really want to be like, no matter what's going on in the pages of Daredevil, I know that Elektra is going to still be Daredevil up through like April of 2024, because that's when Gang War is solicited through. And thanks to the fact that, you know, Green Lantern rules, you can have multiple people with the same code name and it doesn't actually impact the quality of the book. She's the Daredevil that stars in Daredevil Gang War, and we don't need to worry about that.
It's pronounced Yangam War.
No, I'm pretty sure that used to be the most popular video on YouTube for a little while. Is that crazy K-pop song where people were dancing to it?
Yeah. Nico, I'm shocked in this list that you did not include Black, White, and Blood.
I was actually just about to bring that up.
Oh, there she is. I only mention it because it has the precursor story to the one from Elektra 11 that we love so
100.
much.
100.
Sorry, why did I say 11? Oh,
I
yes,
don't know, but
100.
Elektra 11 is my new favorite issue of all time.
I know, it's really
Special
good.
anniversary issue number 11.
Woohoo!
Elektra 1111, make a wish, she'll do it.
Murder.
Murder. Just a wish for that.
So
Just does it.
this is the most religious Daredevil number 1 in a while. I know that 7 had a lot of religious stuff in it. I'm not here to debate what was Goldie. I can't.
Yep.
I can't.
Ooh,
So-
are we not going to get a full answer on Goldie? We don't think he's. I think if we're going all the way to Paradiso, I think Goldie's coming back. But that's a personal thing.
I mean,
I'm here for it.
Well, I feel like I would love to see that be the case.
But I'm concerned we will never get an answer on Goldie.
Yeah, me
Now,
too.
if you take the Goldie out of Volume 7, there hasn't been an overtly religious Daredevil number 1 in many ways since... Oh, wait, that's not the one. Hold on, give me a minute, guys. I have to navigate there manually. There have been so many books.
There's so many issues.
So many issues.
Even you.
So, back in the pages of Daredevil Volume 2, number 1,
Wow.
August of 1998, there was a real weird story involving a baby and my precious Natasha, the first nachos in his life, nachos Romanov, which is Russian nachos. They're served with a splash of vodka. So I'm really excited to talk about the arc that came out here. Now, this is going to consist of Daredevil 1 through 8, 0, and 1/2. For those who are wondering how comics have non-existent numbers, like the theory of 0, which, they didn't even teach 0 as a number to women and minorities until the 1700s because they were afraid it would drive them insane. Look at comics being so progressive. Man, Alan.
We say with our first writer of color now,
right?
on Daredevil.
Truly, I am so confused by how comics came up with deformed numbering before they came up with multicultural creative teams. But so Kevin Smith, hey, you know what? I actually want to say Joe Quesada really is a Latin man, and all jokes aside, and all being funny about Joey Q that I love to do. As another white passing Latin man, I really think it's of note that he was editor-in-chief, and his successor was Axel Alonso, another mixed-race Latin man, so definitely of note. But this volume, gosh darn it, I remember being quite literally 12 years old and getting each one of these. The Wednesday they would come out, my dad bringing them home for me from Midtown Comics. And I remember getting my grubby little paws on the variant of Volume 2, number 2, back when they did second issue variant, because famously, the first issue would sell really well because it's number 1. No one would buy number 2, and if it was good, everyone would start buying number 3. They figured if they did a really rare variant for the second one, they could get stores to order more of the second one. So for about 10 years, there's a lot of second issue variants. Guys, I remember this coming out and running to my dad and being like, Dad, what do you mean that Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, used to date Daredevil? And my dad being like, I don't know. I started reading and oh, wait. Yeah, I guess they dated. That was around when she dated Iron Man and Hercules? Huh. Maybe there didn't used to be enough women in the Marvel Universe, and that is why one woman dated every single superhero, my dad, in 1998. So I watched this come out, and the whole world think this was the greatest thing that ever happened to Daredevil. And I watched by the time Bendis started on issue 16 3 years later, because for 2 years, only 8 issues came out, thanks to David Mack's very unique painter process. It took him a really long time. Echo, issues 9 to 9 to 15 of Daredevil took 2 years to come out. It's a very poor timing thing because the film came out in that time as well. So it was an unfortunate thing, but of course it's one of the most legendary stories in the history of Daredevil, so you can't complain. I watched this come out at the time, and then I watched the whole world call it problematic when the next major writer started. And then I watched it enter into legendary status. Like at some point we said, oh, but it's 2008 and now Ed Brubaker's on the title. So, that Kevin Smith run, that's like an old run. That's like back when Frank Miller was on the book. Fucking hell! Frank Miller was on the book in 1977! It is not the same! I watched this go from A+ is every month in Wizard to a book that maybe we agree should be left in the past, like just randomly giving Karen AIDS.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
I have to ask.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound so insensitive. Did she actually have AIDS, or did Mysterio make her think she had AIDS?
Okay.
Really fantastic question.
He says he doesn't know.
Karen was an unfortunate victim of parable storytelling, and in 1986, Frank Miller had Karen Page, who had not appeared in 9 years, be revealed to have failed as an actress and had to have turned to adult films and became a heroin addict. And she was so desperate for a fix, she sold Daredevil's identity for a fix. And it trickled all the way up to Kingpin, and god damn it, the look of determination in his eyes in that panel is like literally one of the greatest things in the entire history of comics. And she was an intravenous drug user who had sex before condom laws in California. She is a representative of millions of women who were used and thrown aside. So does Karen Page have AIDS? It's probably an illusion from Mysterio. But did too many women get forgotten? And does Karen have to bear the burden of being so many forgotten women in comics because we just don't make the room for them? Yeah, so does Karen have AIDS? Probably not. But should we always remember that real Karens do? Yes.
I mean, I think that's a really good way to put it. But, they do... For one thing, the first thing I said to Nico in my last reread was I don't think Kevin Smith understands how HIV and AIDS work, or at least doesn't understand how to use the language, because. But then upon further dissection, it is also that she was routinely screened for HIV and never was positive, and then randomly was, which I think is medically impossible.
Actually have a false positive for up to 10 years if you have type 1 HIV and you're using tests designed before the rapid test system in 2006.
Okay, so not impossible.
Possible, but the kind of thing where they're making an example out of this woman in a way they would never make an example out of a man.
Right. And it's just this really stuck me as having all of the hallmarks of the problems with Kevin Smith properties and ideas that we all realized.
And call this Chasing Baby.
I mean, people thought Chasing Amy was just this brilliant movie when it came out. And it just had this progressive view on sexuality. And because Holden was kind of a fucking idiot, it was totally okay that this portrayal of a very confident lesbian woman deciding that she just can't resist Ben Affleck and who knows what's going on. Really just kind of did an injustice to Joey Lauren Adams as an actor, to kind of Kevin Smith's understanding of the queer community and spaces that he's not a part of. And that just kind of became his trademark. And I feel like it trickles all the way up to this run where there's just so many things that I'm just there's a point where somebody's are you saying where Matt says, like, are you asking if I'm a misogynist? And it's like, misogyny is a binary state to Kevin Smith in 1998 where people can't, engage in misogyny.
There's a misogyny switch. Matt was turning it on while the drugs were in him, and then he
Right.
turned it off, and he was drinking his Respect Women juice after
Right.
Karen died.
Done. Like, end of story.
Tori, didn't that make you feel respected and beautiful?
Please, Tori.
Sorry, I'm realizing I don't know enough about Chasing Amy to not be currently
you're
very
fine.
upset.
Yeah, Chasing Amy is a rough watch.
Very
As somebody who who knew I was gay, and I was like, this has got some points. I also love comic books. I am now really appalled that I smiled and nodded along with that movie for so long. But continue.
I think that this suffers from the misogyny switch that was happening all over the world in the 90s, which was as long as you weren't out here beating women or calling them horrible names and pinching things, like you were a feminist. Congratulations. And there was no like deeper understanding of it. And so I
like
think
Billie Jean King as much as I like John McEnroe, so I'm a feminist.
Yeah. I'm so glad that Sarah from HR got that promotion. I'm a feminist. So for me, this was just sort of all kind of tacked onto I was very deeply concerned about Matt for the first, several issues of this, and was actually quite happy when it was revealed that it was just poison, because I was like, I don't know what happened to Matt between the maybe 50 issues that I was at before this point that I'd read, and I was like, I don't think he's good, you guys. Like, it was terrifying to watch Matt in this, and so his misogyny was just another thing where I was like, I thought that didn't happen outside of Ed Brubaker, so I was very, very confused today.
So this was my first ever reading of this volume, and I had no idea about anything about what was going on in here at all. The only thing I knew at this point in comics is that Karen Page is dead, and when she was killed, she hasn't been brought back. She's not allowed to be brought back. I knew she died at some point.
Yes.
I did not know that she died during this run.
Same. This is my same.
Did not realize this would be the run that would be responsible for Karen Page's death and continuation of her death, where she is not back yet.
For realsies.
For realsies this time.
For realsies.
She's very actual dead now.
So I color me surprised when we have all these things going on. I kind of audibly gasped when she was like, I have AIDS. And it's like, and she's like, and not visual AIDS. And I was like, what? What is going on? I will say something that I did enjoy about this.
Guys, I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm guys. I'm sorry. Guys, Colgit Mithra of Man Without Fear was watching our show and has an answer for me about Goldie and posted it and tagged us. So I just needed to jump in with like literally the world's most famous Daredevil has an opinion, and I just need to share it. Nico, I was watching a bit. I saw the bit about Goldie. Zdarsky said, yeah, I never wanted to make it explicit in the text, but once you start making those connections, it seems evident that Goldie has been a pawn of the wild the whole time. Like most false prophets, Goldie thought he was doing God's work, even when it created horrible results for people. The realization that he had on the mountain about the Book of the Fist really puts it all in a different light, especially after the reveals in hell.
But the problem is, I love that. But then the problem is that God shows up and gives Matt a reward. So like, it's just very tough to see. I get it. This is why I think that this was cut short, because I think that a couple more issues with the Wild being able, like a full issue of like the Wild being able to be like, here are all the times I showed up. I know you're freaking out right now. I'm plowing through it because we got a show to do. A couple, that getting that episode, that Jasmine showing up in Angel and explaining to the gang how she was in charge of everything that made her born, that she was in charge of the beast coming to Earth and all that stuff. that kind of episode is kind of necessary to re-anchor when you reintroduce the element of an omnipotent being that has actually been pulling the strings, and that we never got much of that from the Zdarsky run, that it was really one issue where somebody is like, by the way, the Beast has a sister. Woo! I actually love the idea, super into it, but just not enough time, man. Like, really not enough time.
Okay, Jonah. I am so sorry. That was getting tagged by like my fan idol. That was just so special. I'm sorry. I did not mean to cut you off. That was just a very special moment for me. I appreciate your forgiveness.
Go ahead, Jonah.
Well, what kind of Catholic would I be if I didn't preach forgiveness? What kind of
Talk
would I
about
be?
me behind my back.
As they say in
Kind
the,
of statin boy.
as they say at the beginning of this Quesada run, like you can forget all you want, but you will never forget.
Also, another very quick question before I continue on my analysis of this run. Is she writing her letters in Braille?
No, he can feel the raised ink of the pen with his special.
Yeah.
She even says it's really quick, but she says, "I wonder if you'll be able to feel. You should get this when you're 75. I wonder if you'll be able to feel it."
Got it. Okay, so what I thought was interesting and fascinating about this run is at least the first couple of issues make you believe, oh, this actually is a religious thing going on, because you have no reason otherwise to believe that it's not. We have all this art about the angels. We have all this making it makes sense of like, oh, there is an actual religious thing going on. I'm a little more surprised, and maybe you can hand wave it and say it's because of the poison. Matt didn't go to Doctor Strange sooner as the person who is the master of the occult. I loved when Matt was still being affected by the poison. Doctor Strange's look, where he's this very just full dark figure, and it just he has the cloak. It's a really great look for him.
Yeah, that was a very specific look era for him.
And that I really enjoyed. However, I feel like a lot of this book kind of goes off the rails, and I say this even without everything. A book like this cannot be published today. Even let's take away. I want to take away the most damning piece of Karen getting AIDS. Taking that part out.
Full blown AIDS.
Full blown AIDS. Skip. Don't go to HIV. Just skip. Go. Don't collect $200.
You skipped it. Yep.
So,
Paul, act up already.
Kind of get Mysterio being the mastermind behind this and the villain with the illusions. Okay, that stuff I can buy, but the motivation feels haphazard. He was doing all of this because he just wants to fuck with Matt. Feels really weak. There isn't an actual reason for why Mysterio is doing any of this. Mysterio being upset by his terminal diagnosis of cancer, where he has a year left to live from, all the special effects stuff that he was doing to his body, led to him to want to do this one last hurrah of messing with Matt. That seems weird. Why is it Matt? He even points out they fought once.
It's because Spider-Man is currently not Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's because currently Ben Reilly is subbing in for Spider-Man, and so Mysterio can't get his revenge on Peter Parker, so he's just gonna do it to Matt Murdock instead.
Which is hilarious, because immediately at the end of all this, Spider-Man shows up in costume to hang out with me.
Yeah, I texted Nico and he didn't get back to me because he's a very busy man. But I was like, oh, is Spider-Man not Peter Parker right now? And then we moved on to other things. And
Yeah.
I had no idea. And so when Peter Parker shows up at the end, I was like, oh, maybe Mysterio was just confused.
It's really funny. Every time Ben Reilly shows up and is like, I'll take the mantle, Peter's like, thank you, I really need this. And is like, takes a 5-minute break and immediately goes back to being Spider-Man without telling Ben Reilly, and just pulls the rug out from under him. And it's like, everybody likes me better anyway, which is now why he is now in a limbo jail.
And that's why he is Chasm.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why there's a hole in his heart, because he can't get back what he wants. But we're not talking about this clone. We're talking about somebody else who has clones. Mysterio.
Well, I think that Corey just fucking straight up bullseyed me in the chest.
He was also in this issue.
And drive-by.
you're a busy man, and I have lots of questions.
Tori, you can always message me. I will answer your questions.
He's just as smart and way more handsome.
And you could keep sending me cute stuff on Instagram like you do.
True.
Tori sends me nice, cute things on Instagram. But this
We'd love that.
series was not
He's the
about nice,
best.
cute things. This was about Matt being tortured morally. And it's... I don't know if this torture is compelling. That's a very weird sentence to say that I don't think I've ever thought to say in real life, but it's not compelling torture. The motivation is haphazard, so the person doing the torturing, I don't know if I buy the reasoning. Matt, there's also, okay, I'm also maybe a little bit miffed about this super secret poison that's completely undetectable by any and all kind of imagination. It's tasteless, it's odorless, it seeps into your skin and it affects you in these ways that are perfect for the narrative. And yeah, you can say that's the whole point of this, but I'm like, that
I think you just described Catholicism.
I mean, I don't know. And then we have the entire thing with Matt's mother being a runaway nun.
No, okay.
Oh,
That's a
Maggie-
pre-established
Maggie-
issue.
we know that.
That's
We
a
do know
pre-established
that.
issue.
I don't let people say
Look
bad
how
things
they
about Maggie.
don't.
The bigger thing is that Maggie
don't
sometimes...
want it.
The bigger problem is that Maggie sometimes is like a 35-year-old MILF, and sometimes she is a 90-year-old crone, and never the twain shall meet.
And
It's not May.
sometimes Typhoid Mary pretends to be his mother. There's a lot going on.
There's
I
a
feel like
ton
Matt
going on.
absolutely has a mommy kink, but that's
Yeah.
less of this point and more so. I now
For Maggie.
I all but just wanted Maggie to turn to Matt and say, "What is it, you cunt face?" Like, I was kind of just waiting for that moment to happen. It was
Yes.
this volume. I think suffers from being hashtag team too much. There's, I think, just a little bit too much actually going on. A little bit of too much problematic things that I'm like, I also don't know if I am always down for a nice amount of cheesecake. However, the way that Natasha is kind of just a pawn in this entire story, and the way that she's drawn, the way that she acts, she's fully there to kind of sexually service not only us, the readers, but Matt. And in a weird way, it obviously taking away a lot of her own agencies.
Tori is already covered in hives.
It was just one of those things where I was like, you can even make the gross argument, this is a story through the lens of Matt. This is how Matt sees Natasha. And it's still gross, but you can understand it because Matt's being gross in this moment. I was just really uncomfortable with a lot of things. Also, not to diminish the strength of Daredevil, Natasha has assassin training. She's not going down that easy. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, and so I will say I had the exact same thought. And this is the Kevin Smith being, a feminist, like, because Natasha is like, if you ever strap me with a baby again and I say, I think my maternal instincts kicked in, I'll beat the shit out of you.
Natasha...
And we're supposed to think that, like, Kevin Smith is a good, like, female positive writer because after Matt just completely doormats this woman and she even leans into it, she makes one comment at the end being like, I'll fucking kill you if you do it again. And that's enough. That means we have established that, like, she's actually more powerful and women rule and men suck. Kevin Smith got it right.
Yay, feminism.
She's doing her Martha Tomei impression. My biological clock is ticking.
That was
I'm
exactly what I
longing.
thought.
I am longing for Ivan to just be standing behind her and for Natasha to be like, Ivan, take this baby. And Ivan to be like, whatever you say, mommy, whatever you say.
That would be fucking amazing. Like, because there is a way to do it. Like, he had some really good banter and patter between them. And, like, she read him down a few times, and that was great. But it really, at the end of the day, functionally, he does say, be a woman about this and take the baby. She does. She then says, that was actually okay. And then the only way he buys it back, because he knows that that's super fucking gross, is this sort of payoff line about how she won't let him do it again.
Lest we forget, before he hands her the baby, she was fully ready to sleep with him.
Yeah.
Now, Tori, you were live messaging me this like it was a drag race finale and somebody was killing some butterflies. So my question for you is, how are your feelings?
I feel like this is where Joss Whedon got his Age of Ultron Natasha characterization from, and it doesn't make me happy.
Yep.
I found her, my mother's intuition kicked in. Her whole thing is just very. It wasn't her. If this was my first version of Natasha, I would not understand why everyone's calling her an assassin, why everyone's calling her a great spy, why everyone says she's the best of the best. None of that.
She's basically Nanny from Muppet Babies.
She's
No wonder why she couldn't lead the Avengers.
Yeah. And him like choking her out and something woman. I was like, this was the issue where, I mean, he snapped her foot and I was like, Nico, I'm done. I'm done. This isn't okay. He's got it's just teeth and black and some little red horns. And I'm just like, I'm out. This is not okay. You told me that Punisher is somewhere else, but I feel like he's here and it's not okay. I hated it. I hated it violently. I hated that she's like, saw your girlfriend in your bed and I didn't want to swing by with a baby on my hip. And I was like, can we not? Also,
fucking baby.
I also love that Matt doesn't change diapers.
Yeah.
The gender of the baby is unknown until Natasha's like, yeah, it's a fucking girl. It's a girl.
But then the idea that Natasha, a sleeper agent trained assassin, knows how to change a diaper for any fucking reason is so insulting. The smarter bit is for Natasha to be like, you idiot. Why would I, of all people, know how to change a diaper? I can't cook anything for myself. I can only kill people. That is what I have been trained to do. You apparently do shelter work. You don't know how to change a fucking diaper. Nobody else has ever handed you a baby and been like, help me, I'm homeless, I have nothing. Have you actually been doing anything this whole time? And yeah,
women know, don't they?
They just her biological clock kicked in and she just knew what to do with that baby.
Her biological swaddler
anymore.
There are 4 women in this series.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got the mother, Maggie. You've got the wife, Karen. You've got the slut. That's Natasha. And then you've got the shrew, and that would be Miss Sharp, who I've never met before, and I was wondering why they had a law firm with her. But it's
don't forget the fake lady who was a fake demon who jumped out the window.
Oh yeah,
after she seduced Foggy like a harlot would.
Yeah.
That great portrayal.
We have a couple of sluts, and we actually do have another mother, the mother of the baby. But
who is a child?
We have a mother.
Yep, that's a 15-year-old girl. And we have who should be the most important person. And retroactively, if we'd known what was coming up in Marvel, Liz Osborne would have been the fulcrum around which this entire story.
Yeah.
This would have been Liz's story.
I'm actually really upset that Nico sprung this on me without actually saying to me, hey, you're only like 50 issues away from this point. If you start now, you can get to this point where you could just keep reading and be caught up.
I did not realize you were that close.
I think I am, based on the little ones that you were sending. It seems like I'm that close. I don't know who she is. She seems very important and very important.
She is the daughter-in-law. She's a Spider-Man person. She is the daughter-in-law of the Green Goblin.
Oh, she's an Osborn.
Yes, she is. She's one of those. She's one of those Osborns, but she's married. She's married into the family right now. Her son has a symbiote. So Norman Osborn, Green Goblin's grandson, has a symbiote. Liz Osborne, her husband. Remind me of the name.
Harry.
Thank you, Harry. Norman and Harry, right. Harry is dead. Harry is dead and had an affair with another woman, and Liz is raising both her own son and this other child as though he is her own, and doing a fucking bang-up job.
Good for her.
Yeah, Sorry, go ahead.
Is she a goblin? Was that what I heard?
No.
She's
Oh,
she's
is
about to be one.
She
Yes, she
herself
is.
is turning into one. No, her biological son has a symbiote. Her adoptive son, a fair baby that she's raising, is also a goblin.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well,
they're
he's
just
a hereditary goblin. Like, it's fine.
Yes.
she's
get
also the founder of Alchemex, which is going to end up being which is now hugely important to the Marvel universe, but it started as a Spider-Man 2099 thing. And I think one of the cooler things Marvel has ever done in their whole continuity is establish Alchemex in our time and sort of indicate that it will just fester into this horrible organization that,
Thanks,
in 2090.
Liz.
What's that?
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Me watching
So
30
that in
Rock.
2099 it will be, responsible for all of Spider-Man 2099's problems. So
That's so
Liz
great.
is a queen. I think it's unfortunate that she's not in this more.
I mean,
Well, she exists to get cheated on. That's literally
Yeah.
her purpose in the story.
Yeah.
Yep.
And life, unfortunately, it would seem.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about Daredevil, Guardian Devil, 1 through 8, this really was the point at which Daredevil came of age. The stories before this were jokes. People weren't really paying attention. It was really no focus. In 1994, they reformatted Daredevil to be over the edge, and it was part of the dark, hardcore, mature readers imprint at Marvel. And by 1997, it's just one step above one of the Kiddie Marvel Adventures books. And this was a master of adult storytelling, saying Daredevil could come and meet up that high. Now, of course, it should be mentioned that this was the, brainchild of Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti, who said, you know what, Marvel, if you give us the money, we will farm out some of the books you're having trouble with, like Daredevil, Inhumans, Punisher, and Black Widow. These titles, as the Marvel Knights line, would go on to give birth to things like the Max line. I truly believe this is a deeply problematic run, and if Kevin Smith, the man he is now, could retell it, would definitely retell it much stronger. But this story, for what it is the thing that really grew Daredevil up. It's the thing that made people think of Daredevil as something more than like a silly little kid book. And for that reason, in a post-Miller, in a post-Ann Nocenti era, where Daredevil became sort of a remnant of, comics used to be cool in the 80s, but this is the 90s, and we only have room for hardcore. This is a decent middle ground on hardcore. I remember watching it become problematic at the time. I look back and I see how it is problematic now, but I did just get my hands on that beautiful gallery edition they did, and that has 1/2 and 1 through 8. The Omnibus edition, Marvel Knights by Joe Quesada, has the 0 edition. When I think about what this run did for Daredevil, it brought Daredevil to a modern sense of storytelling. That's for better or for worse. Buffy the movie was a joke, but Buffy the TV show is a critically lauded idea. I don't know that Buffy the movie should be a joke, with some of the ideas in it being powerful, palpable, and gave birth to the series. But likewise, the exchange here is that the stories that led to Kevin Smith being able to tell Guardian Devil were sort of treated like the same joke Buffy the movie was, by virtue of their era and the sort of energy that went into that storytelling. Despite its flaws, Guardian Devil is the sort of evolution that Hoxpox represents for the X-Men. I would love to get your guys' take on this work. Do you see its revolutionary value in that it killed Karen Page, better or worse, that changed Daredevil canon forever? How do you guys feel about Guardian Devil 25 years out in a Marvel universe that only knows the Guardian Devil version of Daredevil?
To me, I think it sets Daredevil up to say there is no going backwards from this. There is no resetting from this. By taking out Karen Page, you are effectively saying anything before this is the past. Karen Page is a huge thing for Matt Murdock. To do this to her I was talking with Nico about how similar to the Gwen Stacy, because they reference it as well. Karen was in it for 35 years, and after this point, she is brought up as an asterisk in things. She's not so formative that we think we're going to get a version of Karen Page again, although maybe we will. Who knows? But I
Karen
think
Devil, like Spider-Gwen, I'm here for Karen Devil.
This is Elektra's worst nightmare, is really what it is. And it's actually why if they do the full Paradiso and get up there, I don't think Elektra is Beatrice. I think it's Karen, because she's already dead, but you never know. I think it definitely forces Daredevil to be a lot darker. We're murdering babies. We're breaking our friends' legs. We're playing around with magic. We're learning that Matt hates magic. Like, we have a lot of things that are going to keep going from this point that have echoes of what came before, but it is very much okay, the buck stops here. You don't have to go further back than this if you don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, and that was something that Nico and I were talking about. Like, this really sets up a new status quo for Daredevil in terms of, like, also just who Matt is as a person. This shatters him as a person, and that sets up a life trajectory for him going forward in multiple stories, like Shadowlands, Daredevil becoming Kingpin. So it sets up a new emotional basis for Matt. And I really respect that. Every 10 years we look back on the 10 years previous and are shocked at how much more progressive we are. But then, we look 20 years previous and we're just absolutely appalled that we ever give ourselves permission to think that we're done doing the work. For as terrible as this Kevin Smith run is, by 2008, things are significantly better for Matt as a character and for how writers are behaving. 10 years after that, we are starting to see things like Elektra being Daredevil. Unfortunately, we're still not seeing things like women writing Daredevil, which really needs to change. But we are seeing more and more phenomenal women writers at Marvel, queer and non-binary writers. So, like, things pick up. But now we are more than 20 years looking back on this. And even though it laid the foundation for how Matt would continue to graduate and continue to sort of represent what I think everybody has always said he does represent. It still falls really flat that this is the bedrock that we kind of have to base these things off of. He's just so insufferably like the writer's analog of the writer being proud of himself for having learned a thing or two about how to treat women. But the real thing it gets me thinking about is now that we're on to this new run with Chip Zdarsky taking so many steps towards something that felt like a definitive new direction for the character, but I think also kind of ended before it began. I'm just curious if we are in the midst of a new trajectory and status quo for Daredevil that started with the Zdarsky run, or if the Zdarsky run ended what started with Kevin Smith, and we now need the Solid and Ahmed run or whatever comes after it to take us to the next place we need to go, to sort of establish the next bedrock by which Matt can really build himself up into the character he's going to be going forward for a while.
So from what I'm gathering, a lot of what this volume really does is it swings the pendulum of Daredevil being a kid to, I'm not a kid anymore, I'm a bad boy, I can be an adult. And I personally think it maybe swung the pendulum just a little too far, even if it gets us to a place where Daredevil can be taken a little bit more seriously, as well as tackle different adult themes. However, the flagrant use of serious things, and the way that a lot of these characters are treated, I don't know if I can really call this favorable or encourageable to read. It was a little hard to get through, and it felt a little, for lack of a better way to phrase it, self-righteous. It really kind of bears repeating that, like, I think my major issue with these issues is the reason for all this happening isn't satisfying. So I don't know if I like that this is this forced character growth for Matt. It doesn't feel like a narrative success that Matt has to go through all this because somebody just happened to be bored and the original person he wanted to do it to, he couldn't find. It's unsatisfying to me. And while yes, there are some great things that can maybe come about it, I don't know how to. Tori put it best. There's no woman that comes off great in this book. Like,
and runs do have to exist on their own too. Like we can recognize what they do for the future, but they also have to exist as the, in this case, let's just call it the 8 issues that it is. It obviously continues after that. But if this were written today, this 8 issues would end and we would start a new volume after this. So, this Kevin Smith run, these 8 issues plus the half and the 0, they really have to function on their own, as well as, what the work that we do to recognize how they contribute to something overall. And Jonah, I think your point is ultimately, and I agree with it, that they just really don't, for a lot of reasons. Like, even if this is just a one-off story idea, that's fine. It's kind of so silly and offensive at times that it's just really difficult to turn the blinders on stuff like what it's going to set up for the future, if we want to kind of take that moment to look at it for just what it is and not what it's connected to.
Absolutely. And I think my last point of this is, unless you're a fan of Daredevil before this, reading this as it's not my first Daredevil. I've actually been reading the more recent Daredevil and Echo, which I've been having a great time reading. But Matt does not come off anywhere near like a hero. Matt, and you can part of that say it's because of the drugs and the secret toxin that he was infected with. And sure, that buys part of the story, but none of this makes me want to root for Matt. This deeply tragic thing, because this is a tragedy. This entire story is just a tragedy. No comedy of errors. Not even Dante's Inferno, which I guess is what they're currently referencing. It is severely tragic, and at least taking it out of context, the issue after Mysterio kablams himself, and we're getting Karen's letter, I did find myself tearing up because it is objectively a very sad thing to think about, that someone's reading this letter and what she's writing about. But how are you expected to root for Matt throughout this entire volume? What about this makes you look at it and be like, damn, I'm a fan of that guy? This doesn't feel like Matt. It doesn't feel like Daredevil.
And what's crazy is this really was the birth of so many fans. This led into the David Mack run, which led into the Bendis, to the Brubaker. Diggle and Shadowland lost a lot of people, but Wade was one of the highest points of the series' success. The Sewell run had its positives and negatives, but then you wound up right in the heart of the Zdarsky run. There's only been, literally, that's a point. This ends in 1999. Since 1999, it's 2023 now. Since 1999, there has been the Mack run, the Bendis run, the Brubaker run, the Diggle run, the Wade run, the Sewell run, the Zdarsky run. There have been 7 main writers in 25 years.
And that's the thing. It's that there have been 7 writers, because 7 volumes actually does seem like a lot. But when you chop it down to 7 specific visions for a story that a particular, and you're talking about big names here, people who don't just show up and write, a series of Monster of the Month adventures with the character. They're really going to plot something big and overarching. We saw it with Zdarsky. We know it with the Wade run. It does come down to just people making major statements about Matt one after the other. And because he's a one dude, they do become pretty major. Like with the X-Men, it's multiple teams, an enormous swath of stuff. So like it's only been a few times that, we had, after the 90s, we had the Decimation, the kind of ending of the Decimation, which was like a really soft reboot, and then Krakoa. Like those are our eras. We haven't really had much else. But many individual writers have come and told stories about like what the New Mutants are up to, or what X Factor is up to, and then that corporate X Factor team, tons of X-Men teams. But Matt's just one guy, so 7 people really stopping and taking a chip at who he is and what his world means kind of has a huge effect on him.
Well, I would love to use this time to get everybody's final thoughts on what we've talked about today. Kevo, for you, it was mostly sort of like a viewing on the sidelines kind of thing. But I would love to get everybody's final thoughts on Daredevil Volume 2 and 8 if you were reading it, and where everybody can find you. Kevo, I'd love to start with you for your final thoughts, but of course we're going to save your sign-off for a little bit later. So, Kevo, what are your final thoughts on what you've heard about Daredevil this 2 hours?
He is a character who has gone through a lot of history and a lot of cycles. I think the most recent run has been some of the most interesting stuff that I've heard coming out of Daredevil in a really long time. But the fear with modern comics is always the dreaded reset, and a lot of the great work that was just done with the character perhaps being reformatted down to the roots of Daredevil. But I think one of the things that was best illustrated by this episode, as I pointed out earlier, was just how varied his history is, how late in the game so many things we associate with Daredevil came into being. And so I really think it's important to keep the character evolving, and I think keeping a lot of the growth that we've seen from the character and carrying it forward would be really interesting. So I really hope to see some positive change for Daredevil going forward, and some really cool evolution for the character, hopefully.
Jonah, I know you are the least versed in Daredevil, but certainly that does not make your opinion the least valuable. As somebody who's come to Daredevil in your own way, you represent the modern fan who discovered Daredevil as part of the bigger Marvel universe. Now, I know you didn't focus much on issues from later volumes for this episode. You really put your time in on reading actually 12 issues of Volume 2, taking a look at some of the Echo material that would follow by David Mack. What are you walking away with this? What is the big lesson you're walking away from this reading experience with? How do you feel about Daredevil, and is it any different than before you read this 12 issues you read?
Well, 1, Matt is a man whore. 2, you said it to me before, but it was something I was trying to pay attention to, especially in something that is a little bit older. Daredevil often is drawn in a way that is similar to how men who draw cheesecakey women are drawn. I mean, the cover that you had up of Volume 2, it was a very feminine pose in a way that, like, if you didn't know better, you might assume that the character of Daredevil was a woman. And it is one of those things where I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's a woman doing rhythm gymnastics. Like, it is a very fascinating trait that Matt has as a comic book character. Overall, I don't know if this is the kind of volume of what I read would be the volume you'd want to introduce somebody if you're a fan of Daredevil to get them into Daredevil. But I understand.
That's a go-go boy. I just want to make your point. That is a go-go boy.
That is a go-go boy. The boot, everything. I don't know if that volume is the best volume to hand somebody to become a fan of Daredevil, but I can also understand the impact that it would later have in letting Daredevil find success and allow these other writers to find opportunities to bring life to this character that might have not have happened had the story not happened. It's a weird catch-22 where I can respect what came after, but man, this is one of those things where this does not read well in the year of 2023, and I don't think it'll read well in the year of 2028, and I really don't think it'll read well in the year of 2038.
Now, Jonah, where can everybody find you if they want to get more incredible opinions? And I mean that, like, genuinely, I really appreciate what you're coming to the table with. If they want more incredible opinions like that, where can they find you other than just on this show, Thursdays or Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays?
Oh, this is a great quick reminder. Smash that like button, hit that subscribe button while you're at it. But if you want to follow me, you can follow me over on any social at Peak Jonah. That's Peak.
We can't wait to have you back. Thanks so much for being with us, and we love all of your opinions on the Crimson Crusader.
Yay!
Now, Tori, you helped me launch this show with the Billy Club. And, when you speak on Daredevil, I listen. Why? Because the internet has not made it a safe place for women to come and share their opinions on Daredevil. And there's not enough women with opinions on Daredevil helping to shape the fandom like you do, simply by putting your thoughts out there. Now, I know this is a little bit ahead of where you are in your reading and also, current, which is something you kind of thought you'd never be. How do you feel about comparing 98's Daredevil #1 to 23's Daredevil #1 and the 6-volume span that has to represent between?
I think that they're both kind of doing very similar things, but in very different ways. 1998 still has a lot of words on the page that 2023 does not have. We tell the entirety of what happened to Matt in the previous volume on like the bottom 2/3 of a panel of Elektra, that gorgeous splash of him fighting his way out of hell. I think we're able to do it tighter now, but I think that the thing that this #1 has, that the Smith and Quesada #1 has compared to the newest #1, is that this was the first reboot that they did. And I think that is also something that we should kind of be thinking about in the whole idea of Daredevil, because I presume before this point, other books had full reboots, full retitles, full everything.
Nearly every book in the entire Marvel Universe had gotten a reboot just 2 years earlier.
So this is 34 years down the line, 35 years down the line, and Daredevil finally gets a reboot. Does that mean that now Daredevil is being considered like, okay, we're making good money on this, let's make great money on this? Is it that they're like, we have to start to snip somewhere, because at this point, Karen, when they were doing the panels for the one half, when they're like, and Karen and Matt were in love, you turn the page and all of a sudden it's 1963 with her hair. So like there comes a point where you do have to switch things up, or else Matt, who also looks oddly old in these art, he just starts to be 70 years old, because he has to be. He can't not be. And so I think that it's definitely something that I should keep in mind. I think that they're both doing the #1 thing, but I feel like the most recent #1, the volume 8 #1, isn't as concerned about being a reboot. It's more like the same previously on Daredevil that you get kind of anytime there's a slight arc shift, no matter who's in charge. And so I'm not I don't feel as much of the ground shaking, earth swelling. We have to mention Battling Jack. We have to mention Typhoid Mary. We have to mention this. The brownstone. Let's bring up the brownstone. When's the last time we were there? Kind of stuff. So
I bought you the brownstone. I had so much money.
no, he owns the property. She's gonna.
Yeah.
It was actually really nice.
It is
And
lovely. It is.
That is a scene like for a even if it is run by.
So, Tori, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this amazing episode with us. Your contributions to the Billy Club made it what it is. And that's why we're so excited to launch a new season a little bit later on this year. We're going to have an incredible time. And until then, where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
Well, you can find me on all of my socials at SM Tori. That's Tori with an I. We got rid of the other one. Bye, X. But you can also find me on the Billy Club. You can find me here. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcast, because now we're putting out Billy Club episodes on the podcast, and I highly recommend listening to those because, frankly, anytime we drop one, it is extremely relevant to what is going on in Daredevil right now.
Freakishly prescient a minute later.
Absolutely ridiculous. like I'm listening because I listen to us because I'm vain, and we're just like, so there was a series in 1998 by Smith and Quesada that really has a lot to do with the blah 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 blah, and then I'm just like, well, I'm reading this right now. What's going on?
I cannot wait to start filming those Billy Clubs again real soon and get them out to you guys. They are such a pleasure. And until we do, Tori, thank you so much for all of your contributions here on X's for Podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's always so much fun.
It's always the best to have you. Thank you so much. Now, everybody's trying to do the production stuff together. Okay, Kevo, where can everybody find you on the interweb? And then kick it to TK like always. But first, I just want to say, hey, Tasty Cake! Thanks for chilling. Thanks for tuning. Thanks for being part of our show. It's always so great to have fans. We love you. We love your contributions. And it's always great to hear from you, even if just to say thanks for being here.
I am your producer, Kevo, and you can find me mostly producing, but you can also find me on the interwebs at Kevo Really. That's KEVOREALLY. TK, where can the folks find you?
You can find me at TK Elemental.
What?
What?
You have to answer the question.
Oh, that was so long ago.
But it's still the answer that everybody's waiting for. God, it's like, is Donna Martin going to graduate? It's what we're waiting for.
No, that was our 1993 broadcast. That's not this one. What was the question?
We're done with that now.
We're never done with 1993. We said that. We agreed to it.
That's true. Although I have some high-minded designs on 1994 now that I've looked into it. Okay.
What was the question?
So, it's about the two runs. I know enough to answer it. So, I'm really glad I read this. I'm very glad that I read this. I cannot deny that it is relevant. I also can't deny that it's terrible. It really, Tori being like, you did not warn me. I kind of am like, I don't know that I will end up recommending this to somebody else unless I know intimately what their fandom experience is like and know that they want to see those important fulcrum moments for characters and how they swing to the next thing. For all that I can see how Daredevil goes from being like just kind of the guy you can throw street level plus adventures at, to being like really the character that we conceive of today, somebody who is constantly unsure of himself. You are so muted right now.
An Avenger, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I mean, he's an Avenger, but he's constantly unsure of himself. He has the Catholic guilt to end all Catholic guilt. He is a mess of a man. He loves righteous violence. He is so sure of his ability to enact swift justice with violence. And he both loves that he is able to help people and hates himself for always resorting to that. And to swing it back to this new run, we did see he is given this gift by God to live in God's house as a man of God and live in God's love. And Nico, it was you that pointed out, because I was just like, I don't understand. I think something's missing here. Like, I know there's supposed to be more issues, so I didn't even really absorb what was happening. But you really explained, like, he gets this ultimate thing that he says he wants, and then immediately sets it aside to enact righteous violence, because that is what his body knows to do. That is what he is as a person. And even when, you know, he was saying that he would do all of these great acts as the head of the fist for God, you know, for good and for God, he in fact in a certain way just could never figure out how to do anything but violence. And so when he is given the reward to not have to anymore, that's not actually the reward. That's not actually what he wants. And so here we are, and all I know is we are only sort of rehashing. We're not even, like, it was so beautifully done at the end of Zdarsky, and I don't know that I felt the same emotion redoing it a second time at the start of this new number one. So now I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where we're going. If this is a slow exploration of exactly that concept, that Matt pinned all of his hopes and dreams on being God's warrior and got completely screwed by that and now needs to get new hopes and dreams that acknowledge the fact that the only thing he has known to love is righteous violence, that might actually be phenomenal. If this is just how we get Matt back into Hell's Kitchen with a solid tie-in to the book that it came from, and then it's a new story where something else happens, that's going to be a little tougher for me. But I await with bated breath. And again, like, this is somebody's concept that they worked hard on. It might not work for me because I'm really invested in hot mess righteous violence Matt, who has this gorgeous girlfriend that Marco Cicchetto draws her hair like nobody else, and does the same with Mary, by the way. God, so perfect. And so, you know, nobody's doing anything wrong if it doesn't vibe with me, but it does just sort of mean that I might not be so there on the journey, and it might take me, you know, letting some issues build up over time to sort of understand this new direction for Daredevil. If that's what we're getting, we'll find out.
You know, I really love all of your points, and they actually led me, not that I wasn't paying attention, like I was literally, they led me to putting my 9 biggest runs by major writers in order.
Yeah.
And number 1 is Wade, number 2 is Miller, number 3 is Bendis, number 4 is Nocenti, and number 5 is Zdarsky, with no reflection on how strong his run was, but rather his competition.
Yeah.
Brubaker sits at number 6 with Smith at 7, Diggle at 8, and Chichester at 9. But the reason I bring this up and that whole list is because I say that Guardian Devil sits at number 7, and I say that Brubaker's sits at number 6. But if you ask me, Brubaker has maybe the second best number 1 of any Daredevil writer ever. It just doesn't wind up being as perfect a show or as perfect a run. So, you know,
this could be the opposite. This could have started a little slow and just absolutely take off. And I would love to see that. Solid Anomaly has written some phenomenal stuff. I really, again, nobody gets to this job just being terrible at it. And
truly.
Especially, you know, with this younger crop of writers. I will say, you know, some of the older guys, it was a bit of a boys club. There were connections to be had, and that still happens, by the way, and women and queer people and people, non-binary people get left out of the club a lot of the time. But we see a lot of people that we can connect with and sort of know that they're working really hard and they are trying to tell the best story that they possibly can in earnest. And a lot of us could not get up every day and do what they do. So, you know, all the time when I say this stuff, I'm never saying this guy did bad, this guy can't write.
Exactly.
What I'm saying is this just isn't Torrin Grunbeck is writing an X-Men book right now, but this is not my conception of the era for the X-Men books. So even though I'm just in love with the idea of Torrin Grunbeck writing an X-Men book, I'm not full-throatedly singing about this all the time because, it's just not my era right now.
I just need to say, Polar Knights, thank you. It is the perfect evolution of beard growth.
we do all sort of do our things. I think I shaved the last time a week ago.
It looks great, buddy.
Thank you.
Daredevil is my favorite thing in the whole wide world.
It
is literally my phone background right now.
Yep.
It is the background Kebo made for this episode.
Yeah, it comes up once a day easily.
TK, where can everybody find you if they want to hear all of your incredible Daredevil opinions?
You can find me at TK Elemental.
As for me, you can find me at Nico Action, NICOACTION, but more importantly, you can find the show at X's for Show on all your social. That's XISFORSHOW. Cool. That's X's for Show.
Soch.
SO. So, and that's what you should do. So, Anyway, we are X's for Show, and you got to do 3 things for us to make sure we see you next time. Number 1, you got to stay safe. That's the most important thing you can do so we can see you next time. But number 2, while you're staying safe, I need you to be brave. It's important to stay safe, but you got to push yourself every day. Hey, wow, Polar Knights is all the way from North Norway. That's amazing.
Dang.
That's so far. Thank you so much. It's
Thank
actually
you for watching from North Norway.
Right? And we are, number 3, asking you guys to evolve daily. If you can just be a little bit better than you were yesterday, that's always the goal. And different is better every day.
Or get a superpower. However you want to evolve. Just, do it.
Just don't do it the 60s way. Don't play with radiation. That's not the secret.
No, sir. No, thank you.
But, until we see you guys next time, those 3 things. And we can't wait to see you on Saturday. You are the best.